All right, so welcome back to another virtual classroom lesson. I'm Mrs. Canales and I will be helping you today. Today's learning objective will be that we will explore and identify the parts of the instrument using correct terminology, which means we're going to make sure that we label each part of the instrument with its appropriate name. All right, so what do we need to know first? Well, first we need to know which instruments are found in the orchestra classroom. So there are four main instruments in orchestra. We have the violin, the viola, the cello, and the bass. So now let's go ahead and take a look at them individually. We have violin, we have the viola, which is the next biggest instrument, the cello, and then we have the bass. So we have these four instruments, violin being the smallest, viola being the one that looks like a violin but slightly bigger, the cello, and the bass. These are the instruments that make up the orchestra. So let's go ahead and go back into our lesson. We're going to review real quick. The four main instruments in the orchestra are violin, viola, cello, and bass. Now that we know the names of each instrument, we can explore the parts of the instrument. So let's go ahead and take a look at the following handout. Okay, so the parts of the instrument, we're going to start at the top. At the very top, you're going to see that we have a scroll. It kind of looks like a little squirrel's tail. It's wrapped around, or you can even think of it as a cinnamon roll, but it's called a scroll. Okay, and then this right here, these are pegs, and there's four of them because we have four strings on our instruments. They are held within the peg box. The peg box is where we see the four pegs. Then here at the bottom we have the nut. This is a very important part that helps lift the strings from the fingerboard slightly so that way they don't rattle against the instrument. And then we have the neck. So you'll see this longer part where we usually will hold the instrument. We hold the instrument by the neck. The next part, we're looking in the middle section of the instrument, and we start off here with the things that kind of look like shoulders. We call that the upper bout. This in the back of the instrument is called the heel. And usually for like cellist, we rest that against our chest. And we have appropriate places where we're supposed to be putting our instrument, and there are little guides to help us when we're placing our instrument as we get set up for the very first time. Then here we have the fingerboard. The fingerboard is normally black, and you'll be able to see that this is where we place our fingers so that we can get different notes on each of our strings. And then yes, we do have the strings, and you'll see that there are four of them, and each instrument has a different set of strings, and we'll be learning about that later on. Then here, the sides of the instrument are called the ribs. And then this right here is the bridge. It's very similar to the nut. The bridge also holds up the strings, but you'll find it in the lower part of the instrument. So here, now as we look at the bottom, this is the lower bout. As you could tell when we were looking at the middle section, we had the upper bout. Now we have the lower bout. This right here on the sides, these are called the C bouts. These little fancy looking F holes, they are where the sound comes out of your instrument. These little circles that you can see at the end of each of the strings, these are called fine tuners. And the fine tuners help us make small adjustments to the tuning of our instrument, whereas the pegs help us make big adjustments to the intonation of our instrument. This here is a tailpiece, and this is what we have holding our four strings in place. And it is also held by an end button at the bottom. If you play violin or viola, you'll have an end button, whereas if you play the cello or the bass, you're going to have an end pin. So it's a little bit different for the two sets of instruments. So for violins and violas, you have an end button. For cellos and basses, you have an end pin, and this is the longer portion. If you can recall in the picture of the instruments, The cello and the bass, they have an in pin. This here that we have is called a chin rest, and you will only find a chin rest on violins and violas because this is where the musicians, of course, they put their jawline into that chin rest, and as you get set up with your instrument, you're going to find out exactly how you need to place your jaw and how you're going to be holding your instrument appropriately. All right, so those are the parts of the instruments. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at another section of the instrument, which is the bow. All right, so if we could take a look here at the upper half of the bow, we have the tip, we have the main stick of the bow, and the horsehair. Then as we go to the middle of the bow, the exact same thing right here, the stick, this is the middle of the bow, and then we also have a balance point, and this is where we have to become familiar with when we're learning how to do different bow strokes. We must know how to control the movement of our bow, and the balance point plays a big part of learning how to do that. And as we look towards the bottom of the bow, this is the lower half of the bow. We have the silver winding. This is very important because it helps protect the stick from the oils in our hands. This is the bow grip. The bow grip is usually of a leather type material, and that's where we place our fingers as well to protect the stick of the bow. This ferrule right here is where all the horsehair is gathered. The frog's eye, it's not really a frog eye, it's just a decoration on the frog to kind of help guide where we place our fingers. And then we have the actual frog. It's this entire section of the bow. This is really important to know the difference between the upper half and the lower half of the bow. The lower half has the frog, the upper half has the tip. And then at the bottom of the lower half we have the tightening screw, and this is what helps loosen or tighten the horsehair of the bow. Alright, so make sure that you take time to review the names of the parts of the instruments as well as the actual instruments themselves. Remember, there are 4 different ones. We have the violin, the viola, the cello, and the bass. Okay, so make sure that you review each one of those instruments and their parts. Make sure you know which parts are unique to each instrument. And then, of course, as you know, whenever you're learning something new, you need to study for upcoming quizzes that may involve the parts of the instruments. And then our next lesson will be over how to take care of our instruments. All right. You all have a great day, and make sure that you are studying.